He took in one barren alien woman. 2 days later, 3 more stood at his door. Rain slid down the curved glass panels of Glass Reef Atrium, the sound sharp and even, like fingers drumming against a transparent drum. The floating city was built to seem calm. White bridges, pale corridors, the hum of filtered air and controlled tides. But tonight, the calm felt forced. Something underneath was cracking. Rowan Ives stood at the edge of the central promenade, shoulders damp beneath his black utility jacket. The city's lights reflected off his face, tired, alert, lined from years of quiet endurance. He was 35, a civic acoustics engineer, one of the men responsible for tuning the city's sound fields. His work wasn't glamorous. He adjusted frequency grids so crowds would move smoothly, arguments would fade faster, and no one would ever hear what the ministry didn't want them to. He didn't hate his job, but he didn't love it anymore either. He stayed because he liked fixing things. Not people, not politics, just things that made sense when handled right. That, and the pay kept him off the lower decks, where air filters broke often and water tasted metallic. Tonight, he was supposed to be inspecting the new sound field in the Fertility Merit Hall, the ministry's latest public harmony project. The assignment came with no urgency, but the memo had said mandatory attendance during ceremony hours, which meant propaganda needed technical supervision. Rowan had walked there in the rain because he followed orders when they didn't feel wrong. Then he heard the crowd. The applause came in stiff, identical bursts, too evenly spaced, too rehearsed. He frowned, realizing the sound wasn't real. The ministry had preloaded a loop to mask the silence. He followed the noise until he saw the stage. A raised glass platform stood under a skylight that scattered light into watery ripples. On it stood a woman, alone. Her wrists were bare, no jewelry, no identification band. Her skin was deep violet, reflective under the rain, and her white hair hung straight, heavy with water. A torn tide wrap clung to her hips, one side frayed open to her thigh. A voice echoed through the amplifiers. Nyla Wren, Oreni Allen hybrid, failed reproduction sequence. Category, Barren. Classification complete. The announcer's tone was medical, efficient. The crowd below stayed silent. The ministry called it a ceremony, a cleansing of public expectations. Rowan called it humiliation in uniform. He didn't know the woman, but something in her stillness got to him. She wasn't crying, wasn't looking for sympathy. Her eyes stayed low, not in defeat, but in refusal. She wouldn't perform for them. That quiet defiance hit him harder than the speech. He should have stayed where he was. Just another engineer, clipboard in hand, checking resonance graphs. That was his job. But the sound, that fake applause, grated at him like feedback through a faulty channel. He couldn't take it. He stepped forward. A guard looked up confused. Rowan flashed his work badge and walked straight onto the stage. The man didn't stop him. Engineers were invisible. Everyone assumed they were part of maintenance. The announcer faltered mid-sentence. Rowan didn't care. He shrugged off his soaked jacket and draped it over Nyla's shoulders. Her body flinched, small, involuntary, like she wasn't used to being touched without reason. "They'll fine you for that," she said, voice rough, words clipped. "Then they'll fine me," Rowan answered, voice steady. She turned her face toward him. Her eyes were pale silver with a faint ring of blue. "You don't even know me." "I don't have to," he said. "You shouldn't be standing here." She studied him like she didn't believe this could be real. A stranger intervening mid-ritual. "You can't change what they already recorded." "No," he said, "but I can get you out of the light." He guided her off the platform. The guards didn't react. Maybe they thought it was part of the act. The audience didn't clap, didn't speak. Just eyes following as they stepped out of the light into the side corridor, where the hum of air vents replaced the broadcast. Rowan's heart was hammering. He wasn't a hero. He hated attention. But he couldn't walk away from someone being displayed like defective equipment. They moved fast through the glass corridor, the rain now muffled overhead. He opened a maintenance door and led her into the lower levels, the ones he actually lived in. His suite was small, a single open room with a kitchenette, workbench, and balcony that faced the sea. Tools hung neatly on a rack. A pile of sound mapping discs sat stacked near the window. The only color in the room came from the faint turquoise light reflecting off the waves. "Sit," he said, pulling out a chair. "You're shaking." Naila hesitated, eyes moving across the space, not searching for danger, just trying to understand it. The modest furniture, the folded towels, the small kettle in the heater. "You live alone." "I work odd hours," Rowan said, filling 2 mugs with hot water. "Doesn't help having anyone around." "Then why bring me here?" He handed her a cup. Steam rose between them. "Because I could." She didn't drink right away. Her fingers trembled slightly. She looked exhausted, half from the rain, half from humiliation she didn't want to show. "You're not scared of them?" she asked. "Scared, yes," he admitted, "but not enough to clap." Naila's lips tightened into something close to a smile, faint, bitter, but real. "They'll call it interference. You'll lose your job." He sat across from her, elbows on the table. "I build the sound fields. They won't want to admit they can be turned off." For a while, they said nothing. The storm outside softened. Naila set her cup down and rubbed her wrists, faint red marks visible where the ministry's restraint bands had been. Rowan noticed, but didn't comment. "You're from Oreni stock?" he asked, not as an accusation, but curiosity. "My mother was," she said. "Father was Alan." The mix confuses their metrics. So they test again and again, hoping something changes. And nothing does. Her voice broke for the first time. She caught herself quickly, taking a breath through her nose. "They'll put my name in the registry. I'll get relocation orders by morning." "Then don't be here by morning," he said. Naila blinked, trying to read his tone. "You'd hide me?" He shrugged once. "You're already here." For the first time, her shoulders dropped a little, the rigid composure cracking under fatigue. "You don't know what that means." "I know what it means to walk away when I shouldn't," he said. She looked at him then, properly looked. A human with weathered hands, a steady stare, and quiet conviction. He wasn't pretending to save her. He was just doing the one thing that felt right. She stood slowly and walked toward the washroom. "I need to get the salt off my skin." "There's soap on the shelf," he said, his voice quieter now. "And hot water if you turn the valve twice." He heard the tap open, then the soft splash of water. He sat there staring at the cup she'd left behind, the faint lip mark on its rim. The reality of what he'd done started to settle. He'd interrupted a government ritual in front of witnesses to shelter a woman the system had already erased. He could feel the pulse in his neck. Fear, yes, but mixed with something else. Anger, relief, maybe even purpose. The sound of running water stopped. Naila stepped back into the room, wrapped in a towel, her white hair damp and hanging down her back. Her violet skin caught the light from the balcony. She looked less like a public symbol now, more like a person trying to hold herself together. "You don't have to stay up," she said softly. "I wasn't planning to sleep." He handed her a clean shirt from a drawer. She took it, then hesitated before slipping it over her shoulders. "You really don't want anything?" she asked. Rowan frowned. "Like what?" "Like repayment," she said. "That's what most men mean when they offer help." He looked at her evenly. "Then they've never tried helping properly." For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she pulled the shirt tighter around herself and walked to the small couch near the balcony door. The towel fell away, her skin still glistening with moisture. She sat and stared out at the rain over the ocean. Rowan turned down the lights, leaving only the faint blue reflection of the sea moving over the ceiling. He leaned on the counter, arms folded, eyes on the horizon. In the quiet, the city hummed like it always did, low, efficient, mechanical. But for once, it didn't sound sterile. It sounded alive. Naila spoke softly, almost to herself. "I didn't think anyone would stop for me." "You got lucky," he said. "Or you didn't," she said, glancing at him. He met her gaze, calm and steady. "We'll see." The rain thinned to mist. The sound of the sea filled the space between them. Neither spoke again that night. She fell asleep first, her head resting against the glass, breath fogging the window. Rowan sat for a long time watching the waves break against the lower decks, thinking about how easy it had been to cross a line and how impossible it felt to go back. He didn't know what he'd just started, but he knew one thing. The sound he'd heard tonight, that fake applause wasn't going to play again, not in his city. Morning arrived in Glass Reef Atrium like nothing had happened. The city always reset itself. Lights recalibrated, air filters hummed, drones polished the walkways until the world looked clean again. But inside Rowan's small suite on the lower promenade, the air felt heavier, like it remembered the night before. Naila was still asleep on the couch, wrapped in the same towel from the shower, her damp white hair spread across the cushion. The faint rhythm of her breathing mixed with the low hum of the sea pumps outside. Rowan stood near the balcony, shirt half-buttoned, watching the gray water shift beneath the city's glass platforms. He'd barely slept. His mind replayed the ceremony, how easily he'd stepped out of the crowd, how no one had stopped him. That bothered him. Either the ministry didn't see him as a threat, or they didn't care what happened to her. Neither answer was good. He looked back at Naila. In daylight, she seemed smaller. Her skin had dried to a matte violet tone, still faintly bruised from the restraint bands. The jacket he'd given her last night was draped across her lap. Rowan brewed 2 cups of Ferland seed coffee, the bitter scent grounding him. He was already thinking ahead, what to do when the ministry sent their courtesy check. Every rescue he'd seen on this planet had turned bad fast. But Naila wasn't some helpless refugee. She'd stood on that stage and stared down a system built to humiliate her. That kind of composure didn't come from fear. It came from defiance. When she stirred, her eyes opened fast, alert like someone who'd learned not to wake slow. She sat up, clutching the towel to her chest until she saw him holding the cup. "Morning," he said. "You're safe." She blinked, scanning the room as if expecting someone else. "You didn't call anyone?" "No one to call," he said. "I don't keep friends in this city." Her expression softened slightly. "That's convenient." Rowan gave a dry smile. "For situations like this, maybe." She accepted the cup, hands trembling from the cold. "Why risk it?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know me." He leaned against the counter. "Because I heard what they did to you, and I built the sound system they used to hide it. That stopped her." "You're part of the ministry?" "Contractor," he corrected. "They designed the orders, I designed the silence." Naila stared at him for a long moment, eyes narrowing. "Then you've seen what they do to women like me." "I've seen worse," he admitted. "People cheering for it." Her voice steadied. "So why stop now?" Rowan exhaled. "Because yesterday I couldn't pretend it was just sound anymore." The honesty hung between them. The jacket he'd given her last night was draped across her lap. Rowan brewed 2 cups of Ferland seed coffee, the bitter scent grounding him. He was already thinking ahead, what to do when the ministry sent their courtesy check. Every rescue he'd seen on this planet had turned bad fast. But Naila wasn't some helpless refugee. She'd stood on that stage and stared down a system built to humiliate her. That kind of composure didn't come from fear. It came from defiance. When she stirred, her eyes opened fast, alert, like someone who'd learned not to wake slow. It wasn't a confession of guilt, just exhaustion from years of looking away. Naila took a slow sip, her breathing evening out. "They'll come for me. They always come back to collect their mistakes." "Let them," Rowan said. "They won't find you here." She studied him again, weighing the confidence in his voice. "You really think that?" "I designed this place," he said simply. "Every wall, every hallway. If I don't want sound to travel, it won't." Naila almost smiled at that, then looked down at the towel wrapped around her body. "You have clothes I can borrow?" Rowan pointed toward a drawer. "Second one. Anything that fits, keep it." She stood and crossed the room, her bare feet silent on the glass floor. The sunlight caught her white hair as she moved, and for a second Rowan realized just how alien she truly was. Taller than most humans, skin glowing faintly in the morning light, posture proud even in borrowed clothing. She pulled one of his loose gray shirts over her shoulders, the fabric hanging past her hips. When she turned back, he saw something shift in her expression, a mix of composure and unease. "You're staring." "Just checking if it fits," he said evenly. She gave him a faint, humorless smile. "Humans are terrible liars." Before Rowan could respond, the intercom near the door chimed, a soft, neutral tone used only by government staff. Both of them froze. Rowan glanced at the monitor. 3 figures in ministry gray stood outside. Inspectors. So soon. He turned to Naila, his voice low. Stay behind the divider. Don't speak, don't move. Naila nodded, slipping into the narrow space behind the shelving wall that separated the small living area from the workbench. She moved with the silent grace of someone used to hiding. Rowan pressed the door control. It slid open to reveal the inspectors, 2 women and 1 man, all wearing sterile smiles. Engineer Ives, the lead woman, said politely, "Routine follow-up. There was a small incident at the Merit Hall last night involving one of our evaluation subjects. We're confirming no unauthorized persons entered ministry property." Rowan stepped aside, keeping his tone casual. "I was recalibrating the audio grid. The ceremony was still running. Maybe someone entered after I left." The woman's eyes flicked toward his counter, 2 coffee cups. Her smile didn't fade. "Early visitor? I don't sleep well," Rowan said, shrugging. "Helps to have 2 cups." The other inspector scanned the room with a wrist device. No secondary life signs detected. Rowan kept his posture relaxed, but his pulse hammered in his throat. The sound suppressor he'd built into the divider wall was active. It canceled faint breathing and heartbeats within a 3-meter radius. It was meant for testing acoustic isolation. Now was the only thing saving them. After a few tense seconds, the lead inspector nodded. "Thank you for your cooperation, engineer. We'll record your report as compliant." "Always am," Rowan said. When the door closed, the silence hit hard. He waited another 30 seconds before switching off the suppressor. The faint hum faded. Naila stepped out slowly, eyes wary. "They came faster than I thought," she said. "They'll stop once the paperwork clears," Rowan said. "They don't chase ghosts. Just names on lists." She moved closer, her voice low. "You're risking your life for this." "For me? Why?" He hesitated, not sure himself. "Because someone has to show them their silence isn't perfect." Naila studied his face again. There was a flicker of something human in her expression, respect, maybe gratitude, but it was tangled with fear. "You can't fix all of it." "I don't plan to," he said. "Just enough to sleep at night." The rest of the morning passed in uneasy calm. Rowan reviewed sound maps on his display, adjusting grid sectors for tomorrow's census. Naila stood near the balcony, the ocean wind lifting her white hair. Finally, she turned to him. "You said you designed this city. Does that mean you can hide things inside it?" Rowan looked up, realizing what she was asking. "You mean people?" She nodded. "There are others like me. They don't have anywhere left to go." He didn't answer right away. He looked out the window, at the white towers, the clean reflections, the emptiness behind the perfection. He knew the truth already. If he could hide one person, he could hide more. But doing so would make him something he never planned to be. Still, he heard himself say, "Show me where they are." Naila's gaze held his, steady now, no fear. "If I do, there's no turning back." Rowan closed the terminal. Wasn't planning to. Outside, thunder rolled over the sea. Inside, a quiet alliance began forming, born not from trust but necessity. For the first time since he came to this city, Rowan felt something unfamiliar stir beneath his control. Purpose. Rain returned by evening, tracing thin lines down the glass walls like static against the calm hum of the city. Rowan watched it from his workstation, the glow of monitors reflecting off his face. His desk was covered in frequency maps, coded access bands, and a half-empty cup of cold frozen coffee. Naila stood near the balcony again, her arms folded tight over one of his shirts, the fabric hanging loose around her. For hours, neither of them spoke much. They didn't need to. The silence was full of thought. What they'd done, what came next, and what it would cost. Rowan's console flickered with system reports. Ministry grids were being recalibrated for the upcoming population census. Every building, every walkway, every residential pod would have sound filters active. He knew the ministry would use that system not just for counting, but for searching, listening for voices, heat, breath. For people like Naila, he turned to her. "You said there are others. How many?" Naila didn't answer immediately. She stepped closer, her pale, silver eyes catching the low light. "For that I know of," she said. "2 from my sector, One from the fisheries down at the docks. Another, she used to work for the ministry. They ran the same test on her that they did on me. Where are they now? Rowan asked. Scattered, she said. Hiding in old maintenance tunnels, under lower decks, anywhere the sensors still glitch from sea moisture. But they can't stay there much longer. When the census starts, they'll sweep everything. Rowan rubbed a hand across his face. They'll call it a population health scan. No one will question it. Naila nodded. You know how it works? They make the city applaud while they erase us. Her words hit harder than she intended. Rowan stood, grabbed his jacket, and went to the balcony. He stared at the water far below, the endless turquoise stretching into black. When did this start? He asked quietly. The merit program? No, the idea that a person's worth depends on whether they can reproduce. Naila joined him. The glass fogged faintly from her breath. It's older than the city, she said. The ministry didn't invent it. They just made it look beautiful. Rowan looked at her reflection in the glass. Tall, violet skin glowing faintly in the low light, white hair curling slightly where the rain mist touched it. She seemed fragile at first glance, but up close, her posture had steel in it. He turned to face her. If I help them, those four, can they follow orders? Naila gave him a skeptical look. You're talking like a commander. I'm talking like an engineer, he said. I can hide people in the sound network, but it's not simple. I'll need their cooperation. One wrong sound, one misplaced frequency, and the ministry will find them. You'd really do that? He met her gaze. If I didn't mean it, I wouldn't have taken you off that stage. Something shifted in her eyes then. Something quieter than gratitude, deeper than relief. You'll regret this, she said softly. Probably, he replied, with a faint smirk. But not tonight. A faint alarm tone cut through the air. Rowan crossed the room, checking the terminal. A new message blinked. Inspection notice, Zone 9 maintenance units. Random review. Naila frowned. That's here. Rowan's expression hardened. They're still sniffing around. He opened a concealed drawer beneath the counter and pulled out a thin metal device the size of a coin. It vibrated faintly when activated. Noise filter, he explained, covers heat and voice within 5 meters. They won't hear us if they're scanning the corridor. Naila moved closer, tension tightening her shoulders. You're too calm. I've had years of practice, he said. The trick is not waiting until they knock. He dimmed the lights, switched the balcony tint to opaque, and stood quietly beside her as faint footsteps echoed outside the door. 2 inspectors again, different ones this time, moving slowly, scanning the air with handheld sensors. Naila's pulse raced. Rowan noticed her hand trembling slightly. Without thinking, he reached out and rested his palm against her wrist, steady and grounding. She didn't pull away. Her breathing slowed, matching his. The inspectors paused, murmured something, then moved on down the hall. Rowan waited another 30 seconds before lowering his hand. They're gone, he said quietly. Naila stared at him for a moment longer than necessary before stepping back. You've done this before. Not exactly like this, Rowan said, but I've hidden things from supervisors. Data leaks, failed calibrations, a few people who shouldn't have been caught in a maintenance sweep. The city runs on noise discipline. If you understand how it listens, you can make it deaf. Naila tilted her head. And if they catch you? He gave a dry laugh. Then they'll call me defective too. Her eyes softened. You talk like someone who stopped believing in what he builds. He hesitated, then answered truthfully. I didn't stop believing. I just stopped pretending it's for the good of anyone but them. For a moment, the sound of rain filled the silence. Naila walked to the window, arms folded. Her reflection looked back at her, calm but faintly haunted. The women I mentioned, she said. They'll come if I call them. But they'll be afraid of you. Rowan smirked. That's fine. Most people are. No, she said quietly. Not like that. They'll be afraid you'll want something in return. Every man does. Rowan met her eyes, unflinching. Then they'll learn I'm not every man. She studied him for a long time before saying, I'll call them tonight. He nodded. Do it here. This suite is off the main grid. The signal won't be traced. She walked toward his desk, fingers brushing the surface, leaving faint moisture prints from the rain that had followed her in earlier. You think he'll come? They'll come, Rowan said, because you're alive, and that means the ministry failed once. They'll want to know how. Naila's lips pressed into a tight line. They'll expect you to lead them. I don't lead, Rowan said. I fix. Then fix this, she said. Rowan didn't answer. He turned back to his terminal and started coding an override pattern. Lines of numbers filled the screen, acoustic nodes, transmission sequences, sound dampeners. As he worked, Naila sat beside him in silence. The only sound was the rain and the quiet tapping of his fingers against the console. An hour later, she spoke again. You could still walk away. He paused, then looked at her. So could you. Her gaze didn't waver. I tried. They put me on a stage. He said nothing more. The truth sat there between them. Two people who had both stopped walking away. When he finally finished the code, Rowan saved the file onto a portable disk. I'll meet your friends tomorrow. Bring them here after dark. I'll make sure the sound fields cover the lower promenade. Naila stood, adjusting the collar of his shirt. And what happens after that? Then we make the city stop clapping, he said simply. She stared at him, unsure if it was courage or madness in his tone. You can't change the system. Rowan's eyes were calm, but sharp. I don't need to. I just have to break its rhythm. Outside, thunder rolled again. Inside, for the first time, Naila believed him. The next night fell heavier than usual over Glass Reef Atrium. The sky above the floating city was dim and clouded, the rain turning from mist to steady drizzle. The upper towers glowed faintly through the haze, their lights reflecting off the ocean like distant beacons. Rowan sat in the half-dark of his suite, checking the acoustic overlays on his terminal for the 10th time. Every frequency was precise, every field tight enough to hide what was coming. He kept his movements calm, but his thoughts were a storm. He was about to hide 4 fugitives from a government that monitored every sound in the city he helped design. His name was already in the ministry database from yesterday's inspection. If anything went wrong tonight, it wouldn't just be Naila who vanished. It would be all of them. Naila stood by the door, wrapped in one of his spare jackets. Her posture was straight, eyes steady, but Rowan could see the tension in the way her fingers tapped against her thigh. They'll come, she said quietly, half to herself. They'll come, Rowan agreed, but not all at once. I told you, we have to control the entry points. One at a time. She nodded, her voice low. They trust me, but they've been hunted too long to move without fear. Rowan looked up from the console. So were you. Naila gave a faint, humorless smile. I didn't have a choice. They found me. He didn't answer. Instead, he adjusted the last frequency band, the one that controlled the sound tunnel leading from the service corridor to his balcony door. If anyone tried to listen in from the outside, all they'd hear was ocean wind. At exactly 2100 hours, the first knock came. 3 short taps. Rowan recognized the pattern instantly, an old engineer's code for safe. He opened the door. The first woman stepped inside, drenched and breathing hard. Her skin was a deep violet like Naila's, but marked with faint gold tracing along her neck. Tattoos used for worker identification. Cyrith, Naila said, rushing forward. They embraced quickly, tightly. Rowan caught a glimpse of restrained emotion between them, relief mixed with disbelief. Cyrith looked at Rowan warily. This the human? Rowan Ives, he said, holding her gaze. You're safe here. Cyrith's expression didn't soften, but she nodded once. 2 more behind me. He motioned her to the corner and reset the door lock. The rain outside intensified, the sound blending with the low hum of the acoustic field. A minute later, the second woman appeared, taller, her hair braided tightly back, her steps quiet and deliberate. Pyrii, Naila said. You made it. Pyrii's voice was calm and formal. You're certain this place is off their network? Rowan pointed to the wall console. Soundproofed, signal dampened, and unregistered. If the ministry scanners sweep this sector, all they'll see is static. Her eyes flicked over his setup with technical curiosity. You built this? Piece by piece. A third figure slipped through the door, slighter, quick in movement, her pale violet skin nearly blue under the dim lights. She carried a small bag and glanced around before speaking. Jaloa, she introduced herself. If you're lying, I'll know. I used to work in data recovery. Rowan gave her a small nod. Then you know how easy it is to hide a lie in code. Her lips twitched into a faint grin. I also know how to find it. The exchange broke some of the tension. When the door closed, Naila turned to face the group. The room suddenly felt smaller, crowded with the sound of wet boots, nervous breathing, and quiet resolve. Cyrith dropped her bag onto the floor. What's the plan, Naila? You said this man can hide us. That true? Or are we walking into another trap? Naila glanced at Rowan. Show them. He stood, projecting the sound map onto the wall. The city appeared in faint blue lines. Towers, corridors, and underpasses drawn in pulsing light. These are the public acoustic channels, he explained. The ministry uses them to regulate noise, but they also monitor for unsanctioned movement. I've been rewriting sections of the network to create silent corridors, pockets where microphones and scanners go blind. Jaloa frowned. That's impossible. Every sector routes back through the central hub. Not if you isolate the tone keys. Rowan zoomed in on the lower promenade grid, showing 4 highlighted zones. These pockets don't register as empty. They register as background noise. The city hears them, but it doesn't listen. Cyrus stared at him, skeptical but impressed. You're using their own silence against them. Exactly, he said. If you stay within these fields, you can move freely. But there's a catch. Any sound above a certain pitch can break the field. Shouting, heavy impact, or even a sharp tool drop could flag a scan. So we live quietly, Pyrii said simply. Rowan nodded. For now, Naila's eyes moved over the map. How long can you keep it stable? 3 days, maybe 4, Rowan said. After that, the system updates will overwrite my code, unless I get access to the central hub. The central hub, Jaloa repeated, folding her arms. You mean the ministry tower? Exactly, Rowan said. And I can't walk in there alone. Naila looked at him sharply. You're suggesting infiltration? I'm suggesting maintenance, Rowan corrected. I still have my clearance. If I take a small team with me under a service tag, we can access the sound network and duplicate the safe zones permanently. Cyrith let out a low whistle. You realize that's suicide? Only if we get caught, Rowan said. Jaloa smirked. You really think you can fool the ministry with fake maintenance tags? I don't think, Rowan said. I know. I designed half of them. Naila looked between the women, then back at him. If this works, it buys everyone time. Not just us. Rowan met her eyes. That's the idea. The group fell silent. The rain outside softened, replaced by the deep, rhythmic sound of the waves hitting the pylons beneath the floating decks. It was a heavy moment, decisions forming in real time, fear mixing with the quiet pull of hope. Cyrith finally broke the silence. Then when do we start? Rowan glanced at the clock on the console. We move tomorrow at first light. The ministry runs cleaning protocols during sunrise. That gives us a 30-minute blind spot. Pyrii nodded once, decisive. We'll be ready. Naila turned to the others. Get rest. You'll need it. The women settled in the small corners of the suite, some on the floor, some near the wall. Jaloa sat by the window, eyes fixed on the shifting lights of the upper city. Rowan and Naila remained standing near the balcony. You didn't have to do this, Naila said quietly. Rowan looked at her, tired but resolute. You didn't have to ask. For a long moment, neither moved. The air between them carried tension that wasn't fear anymore. It was something deeper, something unspoken. She met his gaze, and for a second, the world outside, the ministry, the scanners, the danger, disappeared. Then Naila turned away, arms crossing over her chest. Tomorrow, everything changes. Rowan gave a faint nod. That's the plan. He didn't tell her what he was thinking. That plan's never survived reality. But as the lights dimmed and the suite fell quiet, he looked around at the 4 women now sleeping under his roof, all of them exiled for something as arbitrary as biology. For the first time in years, he felt his purpose sharpen into something that mattered. Outside, the storm eased into a steady drizzle. Inside, a small rebellion began to breathe. Dawn broke gray over Glass Reef Atrium. The upper spires of the floating city glimmered faintly through the fog, their reflections trembling across the water. The Ministry Tower, white, geometric, perfect, rose like a blade in the distance. Rowan had barely slept. He stood at the workbench, methodically checking every piece of equipment they would need. Frequency jammers, identity tags, portable sound filters. Each tool fit neatly into the pack on his back. Across the room, Naila tightened the strap of her borrowed jacket, watching him with quiet focus. "You're sure about this?" she asked. He didn't look up. "I wouldn't have spent half the night reprogramming their scanner keys if I wasn't." Naila leaned against the table, arms folded. "You didn't answer my question." Rowan paused, exhaled slowly. "No one's ever sure about something like this. But we're out of time." The others began to stir. Cyrith was first, sharp-eyed, already in motion. She tied her wet hair back with a strip of fabric and started checking her boots. Pyrii followed, quiet and composed, her face unreadable. Jaloa was last, yawning, clutching a mug of Ferlin coffee she'd scavenged from the counter. "So this is it," Jaloa said. "We walk into the ministry, smile for the cameras, and pretend we're not already dead." Rowan zipped the pack and threw her a look. "No cameras in the maintenance wings. Just sensors. Keep your voice steady and don't flinch if anyone speaks to you. Let me handle the talking." Cyrith fastened her belt. "And if the system recognizes us?" Rowan slipped a small device from his pocket. A metallic disc with 3 embedded lights. "It won't. These emit false biometric echoes. You'll scan as maintenance personnel from Sector 4. Pyrii inspected the device before attaching it to her collar. "You've thought of everything." Almost, Rowan said. "The ministry keeps a sound lock on every restricted door. I'll have to break those manually." Naila studied him. "Meaning if you fail." He interrupted gently. "Then the door won't open, and we'll have about 15 seconds to disappear before they realize what's happening." The room fell silent. The hum of the ocean below filled the air. Naila stepped closer to him. "And you're calm." "I'm focused," he said simply. She nodded once. "That's enough." The group moved through the lower corridors just after sunrise. The glass underfoot gleamed faintly, the sound of their steps dampened by the filtered air. The city felt different at this hour. Empty, almost honest. Workers were still asleep. Only the automated drones glided through the halls. They reached the lift station that descended toward the ministry's maintenance levels. Rowan pressed his badge against the reader. The door hissed open. Inside the lift, Cyrith checked her pulse on instinct. Pyrii stood straight, one hand resting on the rail. Jaloa kept her head down, mumbling something about bad ideas and worse timing. Naila stood closest to Rowan. Her shoulder brushed his arm, barely noticeable, but enough to remind him why he was doing this. The lift stopped at level 5, authorized personnel only. Rowan turned to the group. "Remember, no sudden movement, no noise above conversational tone. Follow my lead." They stepped into a narrow hallway lined with white panels. The sterile light reflected off the polished floor, creating an illusion of depth beneath their feet. 2 ministry technicians walked past them, nodding politely. Rowan returned the nod without hesitation. His heart didn't even skip. Years of training made the gesture automatic. They continued down the corridor until they reached a heavy door marked acoustic core access, restricted. Rowan crouched, pulling a small tool from his belt. "Sound locks set to harmonic level 3. I can bypass it if no one breathes too loud." Jaloa whispered. "You're joking." "I wish," he muttered. He pressed a sensor pad against the wall. The door emitted a faint hum, then a soft click. The lock disengaged. "Go," he whispered. They slipped inside. The room beyond was vast, a cathedral of machines. Cylindrical servers stretched upward into the dark, their surfaces glowing faint blue. The air thrummed with low-frequency vibration, the sound of a city listening to itself. Naila stopped in awe. This is where they control everything. Every microphone, every crowd field, every ceremony, Rowan said quietly. "It all runs through here." Cyrith frowned. "And you used to work for them?" "I built the architecture, not the policy," he said sharply. Pyrii approached one of the terminals. "Can you access the main grid from here?" Rowan nodded, sliding into the control chair. His fingers moved fast across the holographic console. Lines of code scrolled across the display, mirrored in the faint light on his face. Naila watched the concentration in his expression, the way his jaw tightened when he found what he was looking for. "You're rewriting their code?" she asked. "I'm rewriting the way the city hears," he said. "If I do this right, the system will stop identifying you as anomalies. You'll be background." "Background," Jaloa repeated. He nodded. "Invisible but alive." The terminal beeped twice. He frowned. "Wait, someone's accessing the same port remotely." "From where?" Naila asked. "Top floor," Rowan said. "Ministry oversight." He typed faster. The others stood still, listening to the hum of the machines grow louder, higher pitched. Cyrith's hand went to the sidearm she'd kept hidden in her coat. "If they know we're here." "They don't yet," Rowan said. "But they will if I don't finish this." The screen flashed. Unauthorized code detected. Jaloa cursed under her breath. "They're tracing it." Rowan muttered something she didn't catch and slammed his palm onto the console. A surge of static burst through the speakers, echoing off the walls like thunder. Then silence. Naila held her breath. "What did you do?" "I looped the system," Rowan said, standing. "It'll register that the signal came from the public terminals on level 2. They'll look in the wrong place." "Are we safe?" Cyrith asked. "For now," he said, "but we have to go before the loop resets." They hurried back through the corridor, Rowan leading the way. He could feel his pulse racing now, but he kept his face composed. Naila followed close behind, her hand brushing the small of his back when the alarm lights flickered. It was instinct, not affection, contact to stay together, but it steadied him more than he expected. They reached the lift. The doors opened with a soft chime. As the lift ascended, Pyrii spoke quietly. "Will it work?" "Your code." "It'll work," Rowan said. "They won't hear you again. Not in their system." Naila met his gaze, her voice low but certain. "Then you just gave us our first breath of freedom." The lift reached the surface. They stepped out into the gray morning, the air thick with ocean mist. For the first time since the night he'd pulled her from the stage, Rowan saw Naila smile. Not wide, not naive, but genuine. But as he looked toward the ministry tower in the distance, its lights still burning bright, he knew this wasn't over. They had vanished from the system, but not from the world. And the world, he thought grimly, had a way of noticing what went missing. He turned to the group. "We'll stay low until sunset. Then we regroup. No one moves alone." Naila nodded, her expression serious again. "And after that?" Rowan looked out at the horizon, the faint glimmer of light breaking through the rain. "After that," he said, "we teach the city what silence really means." The rain had stopped by the time they reached the lower promenade, but the streets were slick and shining under the weak daylight. The city above continued its morning routine. Workers filing into glass towers, drones sweeping the platforms clean, the hum of distant announcements about the upcoming census echoing faintly through the air. The ministry hadn't sounded an alarm, which meant Rowan's code had held, for now. Inside the suite, the air felt tight with fatigue. Everyone moved with careful energy, still running on adrenaline. Rowan removed his pack, dropped it on the counter, and started unpacking the tools one by one. The quiet clicking of metal against glass filled the room. Naila shut the door behind them, locking it twice. Her hands were trembling slightly, though her face stayed composed. "You said your code loop would hold for 2 hours," she said. "How long has it been?" 87 minutes, Rowan replied, not looking up. "We're fine." Cyrith kicked off her boots and sat down heavily on the floor. "I don't know if I'm relieved or terrified." "You're both," Jaloa muttered, pacing near the window. "That's what survival feels like." Pyrii had already gone to the sink, rinsing her hands methodically, the water running over the pale green sheen of her skin. "They'll know something's wrong soon," she said without turning. "The ministry doesn't ignore system interference. They'll think it's a calibration fault," Rowan said, wiping his hands on a towel. "My name's on the maintenance schedule for this week." Everyone moved with careful energy, still running on adrenaline. Rowan removed his pack, dropped it on the counter, and started unpacking the tools one by one. The quiet clicking of metal against glass filled the room. Nyla shut the door behind them, locking it twice. "It'll buy us time." Nyla stood behind him. "And after that," Rowan looked up, met her eyes. "Then we make it permanent." She frowned. "You mean a full rewrite?" He nodded once. "If the acoustic grid can't recognize voices at all, it can't track anyone. We strip the city's hearing. Give everyone the same silence." Jaloa turned sharply. "You're talking about shutting down the entire surveillance network. That's not resistance, that's sabotage." Rowan didn't flinch. "You wanted safety. This is how you get it." Nyla's voice lowered, serious. "And what happens to the city when you do that? You'll blind them, but you'll blind everyone else too. No signals, no alerts, no help." "Maybe that's what it needs," Rowan said quietly. A few days without control. The room fell silent. The idea hung there, dangerous, impossible, but tempting. Cyrith broke it with a bitter laugh. "You sound like someone who's finally given up pretending to fix things." Rowan glanced at her. "You'd be right." The tension settled, heavy but honest. The truth was out. He wasn't trying to patch a broken system anymore. He wanted to break it completely. Nyla sat on the edge of the table, watching him closely. "You never said why you came here," she said softly. "A man like you could have lived anywhere. Why this city?" Rowan hesitated. He hadn't told anyone that before. "I came because I believed in it. Glass Reef was supposed to be a clean start for humanity. Open trade, shared technology, no wars, no borders. I wanted to build something that made people's lives easier. Then I watched them use it to control how people breathe." Nyla's gaze softened. "You stayed anyway." He met her eyes, tired but clear. "Because if I left, someone else would just build something worse." For a moment, she didn't respond. Then, quietly, "You're not alone anymore." Before Rowan could answer, a faint vibration rippled through the floor, a low hum that wasn't the ocean. He froze. Pyrie looked up immediately. "That's not from the lower pumps," she said. Rowan crossed the room, tapped the console. A warning flickered across the display. "Grid update. Unauthorized patch detected." His jaw tightened. They found the loop. Cyrith stood up fast. "What does that mean?" "It means they're trying to rewrite my rewrite," he said. "If they succeed, every hidden corridor will light up like a beacon." Jaloa stepped forward. "Can you stop it?" Rowan's fingers flew across the keys. "Not from here. The signal's coming from the relay tower across the South Bay." Nyla was already pulling on her jacket. "Then we go there." He shook his head. "It's guarded. No way we walk in without clearance." "Then we don't walk in," she said. "We swim." He looked up at her, surprised. "Swim?" She nodded. "The Areni built the original underlayers for this city. There's still a water access tunnel beneath the relay tower. It's flooded, but I can get us through it." Rowan hesitated. "That tunnel's 40 meters deep. Pressure's unstable." Nyla's expression didn't change. "You said you were a free diver once." He stared at her for a long second, then exhaled. "All right." We move at dusk. They left when the sky turned blue-gray again, the city lights starting to flicker on in the mist. Rowan and Nyla led the way, followed by Cyrith, Pyrie, and Jaloa. They kept to the maintenance decks, walking along narrow steel paths where no one but workers ever went. The lower levels smelled of salt, oil, and rust. Far below, the sea lapped against the foundation pylons. The tunnel entrance was hidden behind a collapsed panel marked "Service Closed." Nyla crouched, pressing her palm to the metal. The surface glowed faintly under her skin, recognizing the genetic code of its original builders. The panel slid aside. Cold, black water filled the gap. Cyrith stared. "We're actually doing this." Rowan checked his wrist gauge. "If we're lucky, it's still structurally sound." "Define lucky," Jaloa muttered. Rowan tightened the strap on his air regulator and stepped into the water first. The chill bit hard into his skin, shocking but clean. Nyla followed, graceful and unflinching. Her eyes, under the dim light, reflected pale silver. "Stay close to me," she said. The current shifts halfway through. They descended. The world became muffled and heavy, the sound of the city fading to a distant pulse. Rowan's heartbeat thudded in his ears. Naila moved ahead with effortless motion, her body cutting through the water with natural rhythm. The others followed, bubbles trailing behind like strings of light. Halfway through, Rowan saw the tunnel's old framework, corroded steel, cables swaying like weeds. He followed Naila's silhouette, her white hair a faint streak of brightness in the dark. When they surfaced at the far end, they were inside a maintenance shaft beneath the relay tower. Rowan climbed out, coughing, pulling himself onto the platform. The others followed, dripping and gasping quietly. The relay room was above them, accessed by a narrow ladder. Through the grate, Rowan could see the glow of terminals and the faint shadow of two ministry technicians. He whispered, "I'll handle the override. Just keep them quiet if they notice." Jaloa smirked. "Quiet, sure. Lethal, if necessary." He climbed the ladder, slow and deliberate. His hands found the panel under the terminal, pried it open, and rerouted the connection. The code from his wrist drive flashed onto the system. He wiped the ministry's update before it completed, replacing it with his own encryption pattern. A light blinked green. The hum stopped. He exhaled, steadying himself. "Done." Below, Naila looked up. "You stopped it." He nodded. "They can't track us anymore." The sound grids deaf again. For a moment, relief filled the air, clean, fragile. But then the terminal above flickered, and a new line of text appeared. "Trace signal initiated, source identified. Ives, Rowan." Naila's voice tightened. "Rowan." He saw it too. "They know it's me." "Then we go now," she said. They climbed back down, fast and silent. The water was colder this time. Rowan's muscles burned from fatigue, but he pushed through, following Naila's movements in the dark. When they finally reached the lower promenade again, soaked and gasping, the city's distant alarms began to echo, soft at first, then rising. Cyrith looked at him, eyes wide. "They're calling a grid lockdown." Rowan pulled the data drive from his belt. "Then we did it just in time." Naila's breath came in sharp bursts. "They'll come for you." He nodded once, resolute. "Let them." As the others gathered their breath, Naila stepped closer. "You just made yourself the loudest sound in this city." Rowan looked at her, tired, dripping, but calm. "Good," he said. "Maybe now they'll finally listen." Outside, the alarm faded into the steady thrum of the ocean. Inside, 6 people stood in silence, soaked, alive, and for the first time, unseen. The alarms died just before dawn, leaving the city in a strange, suspended quiet. It wasn't peace, it was confusion. The ministry's surveillance grid had gone silent across several sectors, and no one knew why. In Rowan's suite, the low hum of the generators was the only sound. Everyone was still drenched from the dive. The floor glistened with seawater, their discarded jackets dripping near the door. Rowan sat on the edge of the workbench, rubbing his wrists where the water pressure had left faint marks. His breath was slow but shallow. He'd spent most of the night scanning the network to confirm what he'd done. The results were clear. The grid was deaf. For now, Naila leaned against the wall, wrapped in a towel, watching him closely. The exhaustion showed on both of them, the tremor in his hands, the faint redness around her eyes. The others had collapsed wherever they could. Cyrith was asleep near the balcony, her arm draped across her face. Pyriai was sitting upright against the counter, head resting on her knees. Jaloa snored softly, half covered by a thermal blanket. Naila broke the silence first. "The alarm stopped," she said quietly. "Does that mean you won?" Rowan looked up from the console, his face pale under the dim lights. "No one wins something like this," he said. "We just bought time." "How much?" He hesitated. "Hours. Maybe a day before they patch it." Naila frowned. "You told me the code was permanent." "I told you it would look permanent," he corrected. "There's a difference." She exhaled slowly, crossing her arms. "You risked your life for a few hours of silence." He met her gaze, steady but tired. Sometimes a few hours is enough to change what people believe. The air between them felt heavy, but not hostile. They'd both seen too much in too little time. Naila's expression softened. "What happens now, Rowan?" He turned back to the console, fingers gliding over the controls. We disappear before they find us. Once the ministry realizes I was the source, they'll send inspectors, maybe security. I have to erase our trail." He opened a data archive and began deleting system logs one by one. Each entry vanished with a muted click, taking pieces of his career with it. Naila walked over, her bare feet silent on the glass floor. "You knew this would happen." Rowan didn't answer. She tilted her head, studying him. "You built their silence, then you broke it. That's not rebellion. It's guilt." He stopped typing. His voice was low, rough. "You think this was about guilt? Wasn't it?" He turned to face her fully. "I spent years keeping this city calm. I thought silence meant peace. But it just made people easier to control. You want to call it guilt? Fine. But I'm done pretending it was just work." Naila's eyes lingered on him. The honesty hit harder than anger could have. "You didn't have to save me that night." "I know," he said. "I did it anyway." Before she could answer, Jaloa stirred awake with a groan. "You two sound like a bad political broadcast," she muttered, pulling the blanket over her head. Cyrith laughed hoarsely from across the room. "At least we're alive to complain." Pyrii stretched, her movements slow but deliberate. Alive, but for how long? The ministry won't ignore a full grid blackout. Rowan shut down the terminal. "That's why we leave tonight." Naila turned sharply. "Leave? Where?" "There's an abandoned transit station under Sector 3, Rowan said. "It was sealed after the last flood. No surveillance. No patrols. If we get there before the ministry finishes the reset, they won't find us." Cyrith sat up. "That's across the Central Causeway. We'll have to pass through 2 security points." "I can disable one," Rowan said, "but the other will have to walk through." Jaloa blinked. "Walk through? As in, just stroll past with smiles and hope no one asks." "Exactly that," he said. Naila shook her head. "That's insane." "Probably," Rowan said, "but it's the only way." The others exchanged uneasy glances. They trusted him, but not because they wanted to, because there wasn't anyone else to follow. By late afternoon, the rain started again. Thin sheets of water blurred the city's lights, turning everything ghostly. They moved out just after sunset, dressed in plain maintenance coats. Rowan led the way, his ID tag clipped visibly to his collar. Naila and the others followed close, their heads down, faces shadowed by the hoods. The first checkpoint went smoothly. The guards barely looked up as Rowan presented his badge. The sound fields still showed blank readings, his last gift from the broken network. When they reached the second checkpoint, things changed. A pair of inspectors were already there, scanning ID logs on a tablet. One of them looked up, frowning. "Maintenance staff were cleared 3 hours ago," he said. Rowan forced a calm smile. "We were sent to check the audio dampeners after the power spike." The inspector's eyes narrowed. "You have a reference code?" "E-Delta 7, Rowan said, without hesitation. The inspector checked his screen. "That's not on today's list." Rowan's stomach tightened. He didn't blink. "It was added during the blackout. You'll find it in the next update." Naila stood perfectly still behind him, hands hidden under her sleeves. Cyrith's fingers flexed near the hidden sidearm at her belt. The air was thick with tension. The inspector hesitated, then sighed. "System's still unstable. Just get it done and get out." Rowan nodded once and walked through, every step measured. They made it past the gate before anyone else could speak. When they finally reached the old transit platform, it was silent except for dripping water. The place smelled of rust and algae. Faded posters clung to the walls, and the old rail line stretched into blackness. "This doesn't look like freedom," Jaloa muttered. "It's not," Rowan said. "It's a start." He moved to the control booth, pried open the panel, and reconnected the auxiliary power line. The lights flickered weakly to life, revealing the old station sign, Lyran, Sublevel 3. Cyrith whistled softly. "No one's been down here in years." "Good," Rowan said. "That means it's ours now." They spread out, exploring the space. Pyrii found a dry corner to set up blankets. Jaloa dug into the ration packs. Cyrith stood guard near the entrance, her hand resting on the old rifle she'd carried from her work site. Naila approached Rowan as he checked the wiring. "You knew this place existed?" "I helped design the transit grid before they shut it down," he said. Flood damage made them abandon it. Why keep it secret? Because I knew one day, people like you might need it. Her expression softened again, but her voice was firm. You keep saying people like me. You mean people who failed their tests? He looked up, his eyes dark but sincere. I mean people who were told they don't belong here and still refuse to disappear. Naila looked at him a moment longer before nodding. Then maybe we belong together. He didn't answer with words. He just reached for her hand, rough, warm, human, and held it. She didn't pull away. For the first time in days, they both allowed themselves to breathe. Outside, the ministry's searchlights moved slowly across the ocean surface, scanning for ghosts in the fog. They would find nothing, just the sound of waves against the pylons and the hum of a city that had, for the first time in years, lost control of its own silence. Dawn began. The night was quiet beneath Glass Reef Atrium. Above, the ministry lights swept across the sea, searching for movement. Down in the abandoned Lyran sublevel, the air was still and heavy with salt, the silence broken only by the drip of water and the hum of the generators Rowan had coaxed back to life. They had survived the longest day of their lives. No alarms, no chases, just exhaustion. Rowan sat against the wall near an old support column, the light from a broken fixture painting a pale line across his face. He looked hollowed out but steady. Every muscle in his body ached, but he didn't complain. Across the platform, Naila and the others gathered what little they had: blankets, food rations, a few thermal lamps scavenged from his pack. When the lights dimmed, the air grew warmer. The tension that had hung in the room for days finally began to melt. Naila walked toward him slowly, her movements quiet, deliberate. She was wearing one of his shirts again, sleeves rolled up, the hem brushing her thighs. Her white hair was damp, loose from its tie, and her violet skin caught the amber glow of the lamps. She sat beside him without speaking for a while, their shoulders touching. Rowan exhaled. "You should rest." Naila's voice was soft but certain. "You should too." He looked at her and saw something in her face he hadn't let himself see before. Peace after weeks of fear. She smiled faintly, her silver eyes tired but alive. "You kept your promise," she said. "You gave us silence." Rowan shook his head. "You gave it to yourselves. I just showed you how to hold it." Cyratha's laugh broke the quiet. She sat across the room, leaning back against a steel crate, watching them. "He's still trying to sound humble," she said, voice low and amused. Naila smiled without turning. "Let him. It suits him." Hyrai joined her, sitting cross-legged, her posture regal even in exhaustion. "We're alive because of him," she said simply. Rowan looked at her, uncertain what to say. Jaloa, half awake by the lamp, muttered, "We're alive because we didn't give up." Then she looked at Rowan and added, "But we might have if you hadn't shown up when you did." The room settled into quiet again. The sea outside pulsed faintly through the walls. Naila turned toward him, studying his face. "You still think like an engineer," she said softly. "Always building, always fixing. When do you let yourself stop?" Rowan's voice was quiet. "When it's safe to stop. And now." He hesitated, then looked at her properly, eyes steady, voice low. "Now it feels safe." She leaned in just enough for him to feel the warmth of her skin against his arm. No words followed. Her breath was slow, steady. The air between them shifted, heavier with something unspoken. Across the room, Cyrus stood and crossed toward them, her steps light. She crouched near Rowan and rested a hand on his shoulder, testing his calm. He didn't move away. Hyrai followed, silent and composed, her white hair falling forward as she knelt on his other side. Jaloa stayed where she was at first, watching, unsure, but when Naila extended a hand toward her, she came to, slow but certain. No one spoke for a long time. There was no need for it. The atmosphere changed gradually, almost invisibly. What had been fear and tension turned into quiet trust. They had shared hunger, exhaustion, escape. Now, in this moment, it was warmth. Skin against skin, hands finding reassurance instead of possession. Breathing mingling. Every gesture unhurried, intentional. Rowan felt Naila's hand slide up his arm, firm but gentle. She looked at him, her expression open and real. "You're trembling," she said. "I'm aware," he replied with a faint, honest smile. Cyrith chuckled quietly. "He's human. They do that when they stop pretending to be made of steel." Pyriai's voice was lower, calm as always. "Then let him stop pretending." They all drew closer, a slow folding together of bodies, seeking warmth rather than spectacle. The light dimmed, shadows merging against the steel walls. Rowan's breath hitched when Naila's fingers brushed his jaw, and for a brief moment, the entire world, the flooded tunnels, the alarms, the ministry, ceased to exist. There was only touch, warmth, and the sound of steady human and alien heartbeats sinking in a rhythm older than the city itself. When it was over, they didn't separate. They stayed close, 4 violet-skinned women and 1 exhausted human, bound not by desperation, but by shared survival. The station lights flickered softly, the sound of the sea echoing faintly through the pipes. Naila rested her head on Rowan's shoulder. "What now?" she whispered. He answered after a moment, voice barely audible. "We built something new, a place they can't control." Jaloa murmured from the floor, half asleep. "A place that doesn't clap." Rowan smiled faintly. "Exactly." Cyrith exhaled, stretching her legs. "Then tomorrow, we start." Pyriai's eyes opened, reflecting the faint light. "And if they come again?" Naila turned her head slightly, her voice calm but firm. "Then they'll find we're not afraid anymore." Outside, the sea struck the pylons in slow, rhythmic waves. The ministry's searchlights still crossed the horizon, but their reach stopped far short of the sublevel. The small, hidden space was theirs now, a quiet heartbeat under a city that had forgotten what freedom sounded like. Rowan's eyes drifted closed. He felt Naila's breath against his chest, the faint warmth of Cyrith's arm over his shoulder, the weight of Pyriai and Jaloa resting nearby. He didn't need words for any of it. The meaning was already there, in the shared silence, in the trust that had replaced fear. Above them, Glass Reef Atrium gleamed like a distant shell over the water, unaware that beneath its perfect surface, something entirely new had begun. Not rebellion, not chaos, but a kind of peace born from human defiance and alien grace. For the first time, Rowan slept without the hum of guilt in his ears. The city's silence was no longer his burden, it was his gift.